listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast with your host, Andy Plimer. Bringing you up-to-date coaching concepts from the world of rugby. Sharing ideas to make the game better.
All right, welcome to episode number 58 of the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. I'm your host, Andy Plimer, and joining me today is Matt Taylor. Matt is the Scottish defence coach. He's a 46-year-old father of two and a former flanker who played in both Australia and Scotland. He started his coaching at Exeter Chiefs in 2005 and then went back to Australia and worked with Sunnybank Rugby Club, the Southport School, the Queensland Reds, and following 2013, went and coached in Scotland. He was with the Glasgow Warriors and he's now with the national team, and it's a pleasure to have him on the show. So welcome, Matt.
Thanks, Andrew. Great to be here.
Yeah, no worries. Bit on your playing there. I believe you also played Scotland A. Is that right? How'd you get into rugby, and then how did it end up being at Scotland A?
Yeah, well, I started playing rugby probably when I was about 12 years old. My parents are Scottish. That's where my kind of Scottish connection comes from. And I went to a school in Brisbane called St Lawrence's, and they were a big rugby school. So once I got there was no playing any more football or soccer, and it was straight into rugby. And I just went in from there and just played for a few clubs in Brisbane there. I started off at South in Colts and then grades, and then I moved over to Sunnybank later on. In between, I went over and had a year in Houston in Texas in 96. Quite fun. And actually got up to Canada for a couple of weeks to the Marilomas. I think it was 2 weeks.
Yeah, in BC, yeah.
Cool. And then went back into Australia, and then at about 28 years of age, I came over to play in Scotland with my Scottish heritage, and then got a contract with Edinburgh Rugby and the Borders Rugby for a number of years, and played about 4 or 5 times for the A team, which was fantastic.
Oh, great. That's awesome. And must have taken you a while to get used to wonderful Scottish weather.
Yeah, it was a wee bit different. I think, playing on the hard tracks of Australia and into the damp kind of boggy kind of pitches of Scotland and the UK. But, and they certainly play a different style. But I think as a player as well as a coach, I think it's kind of good grounding to have been in both environments, and I was just lucky to get opportunity to be professional for 4 years. A dream come true. I wasn't good enough to make a super team in Australia, but I was good enough to become professional in Scotland, which was fantastic.
Yeah, awesome. That's great. All right. What about coaching? What did those first coaching experiences look like? And looking back now, what was kind of some of the big takeaways that you got from those first experiences?
Yeah, I think the big thing for me was I'm a teacher by trade, similar to you. I was a PE teacher, and so kind of as I was just finishing university and into teaching, I was at a couple of all boys schools. So I coached straight away, even when I was playing. So I really enjoyed that, just imparting the knowledge and working with younger kids. And then I'd go play in the afternoon myself. So that was kind of my first little bit of coaching, and then went professional and didn't really have much time to kind of coach. And then as soon as we finished that, I was kind of straight into kind of coaching at Exeter. And, I just kind of probably loved the, coaching and teaching goes hand in hand, and just being able to impart knowledge and see people develop and improve, and both individually as a group really appealed to me. So, and that's probably where I've really enjoyed it. And I'm lucky that it's my profession, so it's great.
Yeah, I think that's definitely for me too, just seeing that those not only the individuals get better, but the team as a whole grow and be greater than the sum of its parts. That's huge for me. I really enjoy that too. And when you were with Exeter, did you start as a defence coach straight away, or did you have a few different roles?
Yeah, so Exeter was looking for a defence coach, and I just finished up in the Borders. I had a few injuries, and I was looking to get into coaching. And at that time, they were in the Championship. They've since moved up to the Premiership now. But yeah, I was doing defence there, which was good. The guy, Rob Baxter, who's now their head coach, he was actually their captain at the time. So it was good to work with Rob, and I'm still quite good friends with him now and talk to him quite regular. So, no, it was great. And then I had a year there and went back to Australia and got back into teaching and coached at Sunnybank and did well there, and then went to a really good private school, which was right into the rugby on the Gold Coast. And lucky enough, there was a number of really good players there, and we had a pretty good success there, like the likes of James Slipper and Rob Simmons and Ben Tapawai's over in the UK now. So, yeah, we had a good group there, and then moved into the Reds Academy for a number of years and did Australian 20s, and then got an opportunity to coach at the Reds in 2010. So that's where it probably really kicked off in terms of, coaching at the highest level. And so, yeah, it's been great.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely touch on the time at the Reds because that was, for Australian rugby too. That was a pretty awesome period there. And love to get your ideas there. What for the Scotland role? You're obviously the defence coach, but what does that kind of look like? We were just talking off air there that you're in the off season, out of season time now, and you're reviewing the Six Nations. And what's your week look like working for Scotland in season and out of season? How's that pan out?
Yeah, well, like you probably just suggested before, when I came over to Scotland, I had a dual role. I was working for the Glasgow Warriors and also Scotland, so I was a pretty busy coach in terms of, just about every week I was coaching a game. So at the moment, I'm no longer with the Warriors. I'm just full-time with Scotland, so I have a lot more time. So basically my week at the moment is good in terms of usually from Friday till Monday you're watching games. And in Scotland, we as a coaching group will go to the Edinburgh and Glasgow games live. We're there just to see our players live, and then we'll catch up watching everyone else's game within that period.
Yep.
Usually on a Tuesday then we'll either meet in Glasgow or Edinburgh, and we'll sit down as a coaching group and go through and kind of assess each player, how they went on the weekend, where we see them in terms of their ranking. So we usually do that on a Tuesday. Whether Edinburgh or Glasgow, we'll then watch a training session of one of those clubs.
Yeah.
Dave Rennie, who was at the Chiefs, very good coach. He's at Glasgow, so it's interesting watching them. And you've got Richard Cockrell, who had a lot of success at Leicester for many years. He's at Edinburgh, so that's quite good. Then on a Wednesday, we'll often meet at Murrayfield, and we might have a learning day. So we might have a look at one area of the game, and we'll pick that apart in terms of, say, we might see something in Europe, say Munster's doing something really good at the breakdown. We'll kind of assess them, look at them, see the advantages of either their technique or a strategy they're using, and see and discuss whether we could use that. We might look at, individual players from outside our kind of union and see what they're doing, and we'll get someone to come in and talk to us. Weekly, Greg is very good on that, getting people in and talking to different people. And then usually on a Thursday, we'll go to the other. If we've been at Glasgow on a Tuesday, we might go to Edinburgh on the Thursday,
right,
and kind of do the same thing, just kind of catch up, talk about maybe like our tour and things like that. So Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we're kind of usually somewhere together, and then Mondays and Fridays you're working from home, which is fantastic. So I've just got a lot more time to look at the game and assess things and review, whereas before I was probably always pretty much in game mode week to week, which has been good. After 5 years of doing both, it's been really good just to concentrate on Scotland this year.
Yeah, no, that sounds like it just sounds like the dream. Just watching and working around rugby all the time. I think that's pretty awesome. So it must be great. When you first started with Scotland as a defence coach, what were your main priorities? Like when you were from an outsider looking in, when you got the position, what was your initial kind of thoughts, and then how did you go about fixing some of the things or strengthening some of the things?
Yeah, well, it's funny. I think because I had a dual role, I was kind of working on two fronts. So at Glasgow, the defence at Glasgow was actually statistically very good. They'd done a good job. They had a really good culture. I think Scotland was going through a tough time, so they hadn't had as much success. Glasgow had the year before had reached the semi-finals. I think in terms of their work rate and effort and that, they were very good. What I probably added to that is a bit more to the systems, a bit more detail around the systems, a bit more detail around the technique. Scotland, and we'll probably touch on this later on, I think international teams are different to club teams. With the club team, I had a lot of time to work with them week in, week out. With a national team, it's harder to affect that change as much. And again, we'll talk about this maybe later on, but there's two coaches now at Edinburgh and Glasgow who are very much similar to me in terms of philosophies and what we do. I've got a really good relationship with them. So it's making my job a hell of a lot easier than when I first came in. Because Edinburgh were doing lots of things differently to what I was hoping to put into Scotland. And then again, you've only got the guys for maybe 2 sessions before an international game and different systems and that. But and that's a challenge of international rugby sometimes. But certainly to where I was when I first started to where I am now, I think it's a hell of a lot different. But setting up a defensive identity and probably a feeling for the team was kind of my first priorities. Just get their heads around working hard for each other. And then we worked really hard on the post tackle and the tackle. I think when you kind of bring in a defensive identity, it's really important that you work hard on those maybe 2 or 3 things that you want as your trademarks. That could maybe you want to be a really good tackling team. You might want to have good line speed. You might want to affect the post tackle. And they were probably the 3 things that I kind of focused on. Now, we've certainly improved in those areas, and it's an ongoing thing with international rugby. We're looking to improve all the time, but they were the 3 things. And I think for me, it was just bringing in that hard-nosed approach and selling that to the players that, if we're to get better defensively, we're just going to have to keep working at it. And at Glasgow there for a number of years, we were the best defence in the league, which was fantastic. And that started filtering into the Scotland team as well, which made my job a lot easier.
Yeah, it's funny. I like it. It's almost like they're 2 separate games, attack and defence, and that defence is very kind of psychologically based. There's skills to it, and there's individual technique and that stuff, but the whole concept of having a really good mental approach to defence and being unified with the guys next to you or the girls next to you. We had I had Ben Darwin on talking about team cohesion, and his you've probably read a lot about it already, and that team cohesion really shows up in defence. That those cohesive teams that are really tight and have played a lot together, they have outstanding defence. How do you intertwine that into your coaching?
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because, as you said, I think with the cohesion part, we had a lot of this. Gregor Townsend took over from Vern Cotter just recently, probably about 9-10 months ago now, and one of our big discussions area was around cohesion. So that's whenever we select or wherever we talk, we really bring in or talk about the cohesion factor and work together. So some of that cohesion is working hard and keeping combinations. Now, again, my area is defence, but that's probably in all areas. So what we've really looked at sometimes is when we're selecting teams, and we did this when we went on tour last year we played Italy and Singapore and Australia, and then Fiji and Fiji. We sometimes, particularly in the first 2 games, we really selected on combinations a lot in their team. So for those people that don't know the Scotland scene that much or a little bit, so we've got 2 professional teams, Edinburgh and Glasgow, and probably 2/3, 3/4 now of the Scotland team is picked from those 2 teams. So sometimes we would there could be a slightly better or lesser player in a position, but we'd pick the group as a group, whether it's a front row, whether it's a 9 and 10, whether it's centre or back 3. So that's been a big part of what we've tried to do at international level. Just pick sometimes on cohesion. If we think that's the right thing. Now that's not always the case, but in a lot of cases we've really looked at that as being a big part. And the cohesion factor, like I was mentioning before, can be systems as well. And as I've said, probably in the last year particularly, there's a Callum McRae, he's the defence coach of Edinburgh, a really good coach. He's pretty much on the same page as me. And Kenny Murray, who does Glasgow Warriors, was my offsider for 4 years. And when I left the Warriors, he would pick up the defensive part of the game when I was away with the national team. again, there's slight changes, but probably not that big that we can't come together as a group really well, which has been a big help to me.
Yeah, I think if you look at the Southern Hemisphere, I think that's one of the big things with New Zealand teams is they do a lot of very similar things, and when they come together as the All Blacks, obviously they've become pretty awesome. But I think it can't be underestimated how important that is. That we can't just coach everyone up. That there's a bond, especially in key positions and in tight parts of the game. It's really important.
No, I think you're right, and I think the New Zealand teams do very well because they've generally they're pretty similar with their defensive shapes and systems. But I think the thing too, watching them and talking to a few New Zealand coaches both here and abroad, is they keep things pretty simple. But I think the Kiwis, they're pretty good in terms of their tackling and their post tackle, and their attitude's always good. I don't think you make it to that level in New Zealand unless you're very, very good at your core skills defensively, and so they're normally pretty good, and they've generally got pretty good attitudes. They generally turn up most games, don't they? So.
Yeah, exactly. No, for sure. One of the big things for me is being a games-based coach and making that environment look like the game they play in. I've had trouble in the past trying to incorporate games into coaching defence. I think mainly because you think defence and you think, it's got to be contact-based, but obviously it doesn't. How do you incorporate games when you're coaching defence, and how much of your sessions would involve games?
Yeah, I think it's great that you're talking about games-based. I think as I progressed as a coach, particularly even from my time at the Reds to my time here, I probably use more and more games, and particularly as we've just discussed with international rugby, sometimes you've only got a limited time. So I think games-based approach and using games has allowed to get a lot of the principles and core kind of systems all at the same time. And Greg Townsend, who I work with now, is been a big advocate of games-based training. He's very smart in terms of looking at what we want, even week to week, and then coming up with games which just kind of highlight or pinpoint things which you want to bring out in the game. But listen, I've got a couple of core skill games that we use in Scotland, and some of which we've made up ourselves, some of which we've pinched off other teams. One we use quite a lot. We probably used it a bit more probably a couple of years ago, but still use it to this day. Is we call it Love the Chase game, and that's basically, we wanted to kind of come up with a game which worked on our kicking and our kick chase and our pressure. And there's a few rules to it, but basically simply is, either from a structured or unstructured exit, where you're looking at maybe you get 2 or 3 phases in your own half, and then you had to kick. Then from there, 1 or 2 things would happen. So if it was a contestable kick and you got it back in the air, and again, there's rules around whether you want to make it contestable in the air or not. But then if you got the ball back, then you had maybe 6 or 7 phases to attack. So that was kind of a principle. Okay, make it contestable, get up, win it back, and then you get the ball to attack. If the other team gets the ball, again, they've got only 3 phases to exit. So part of that strategy from a defensive point of view is your kick pressure and forcing poor kicks, and then scoring back, and all those things. So you're really working on both sides of the ball, but really focusing on the kick, and you get certain points for, say, a charge down, so many points for a poor kick, and things like that. Or if you shut them down in the 22, you get more points. So again, it's like any game. You try and make rules or come up with points according to kind of what you want to promote or do there. So that's one of the games. Another game that we do quite regularly is the core skill game. We call it this defensive integrity game. And basically it's usually maybe 5 defenders v maybe 8 attackers. Those 5 defenders, you kick the ball out from behind your try line, and then the 7 or 8 attackers have the whole field to attack in. Now, basically, if they get a tag, they've got a long place, put the ball down. First person comes in, he must pass, he can't scoot. And basically what the game's trying to promote is working hard and never get getting cut up the middle. So the attacking team will get 3 points if they make a break through the middle of your defensive line.
Okay.
So they do a switch and pull you apart and get through. They'll say maybe get 3 points. If they score a try on the outside, which you don't really want to concede a try, but if you do, then you push them to the sideline using your friend. You're not getting busted up in the middle. They get 1 point. Now, if you force an error, okay, those 5 guys come back to behind the try line. You might have 3 guys in reserve. They tag over and you kick it off. And that you might do duration of 2 minutes or 2.5 minutes. And so it's a bit of a competition. Then you swap sides. And it's a team which basically limits the other team to the least amount of points in attack. So that's another game we do quite a lot of.
Oh, that's great. I love that last one. I love them both, but that last one, often where when you're in defence, you're overloaded and you have to scramble hard, and that game, I could see that really helping in that part of the play.
There's another few games, and again with a lot of games, you're working both sides of the ball, but again, a couple of the other games we play, which are for attack, but they work your defence. So we play another game called Transition Touch. Yep. Which is there might be a team of say 8v8, but then there's another set of maybe 4 players in a different coloured bibs, and they're always on the attacking side.
Right.
So you'll kick the ball, and there'll be those 8 guys already in one colour, but they'll also have another 4. Okay, so that will be 12v8, and then sometimes we might go for unlimited phases. Sometimes it might be 6. And if there's a turnover or whatever, automatically those guys who are on one side, they'll swap over and then come on the other. So always defence is undermanned, and you're then working on your systems. We call it Saints here. A lot in Australian teams, they'll call it jockey. Or probably New Zealand teams might call it jockey, some teams as well. So you're always undermanned. So you're working that defensive system when you're undermanned, you're under stressed and things like that.
Oh, that's great. That's awesome. I think there's some real usable nuggets there for coaches to grab for that. So yeah, thanks for that. And what about post game? How do you there's 1,001 stats you can look at either side of the ball. What for you? What are some of the key kind of metrics you look at? And by the sound of it, a lot of them would be more kind of attitude and effort and those kind of things rather than tackles missed, tackles completed.
Yeah, I think there's 2 things you can think of there. I think there's you'll probably spend a lot of time as coaches or a coaching group really going through with a fine-tooth comb some of the stats and what you see, but it's then working out what you want to talk to your players about or what do you want to highlight, because if you go through too much, then it's just too much for the player. So you just want to probably try and work on certain things. But listen, I think individually, it's pretty simple that you always probably look at how individuals are tackling, how they're making the tackle, is a tackle dominant. The big thing in terms of our work rate, which a lot of international teams, a lot of teams will do, will be how quickly they get back on their feet after a tackle, and that has to do with work rate and effort. So that's something which you can be tough on your players with in terms of being hard on them if they're not doing that well or not doing to a certain standard, because again that's got to do with their effort areas rather than anything else. So that's something we'll look at individually. I think, listen, the big ones are tries as a team, tries conceded or line breaks conceded, and probably conceded. I mean, you'd like to think in most games, international games, you can keep if you keep the opposition to under 18 to 20 points, you're doing pretty well and you're in a pretty good space. So that's, you've got various kind of standards or goals that you looked at. The other thing, as I was saying before, is Scotland as a nation, we see our post-tackle actions as something really important to us. Now, the way rugby's going, and some teams don't kind of contest at all. Some teams only contest in certain parts of the field. Generally, we've worked both at Glasgow and Edinburgh doing the same now. In Scotland, we've got some really good pay from our post-tackle actions and working hard in that space. And we feel that's part of our rugby identity. Scottish people in general, they fight for everything, and there's a real fight in them. And we've done reasonably well in that space. I think from Six Nations we came out pretty well, although France did really well. And there's advantages and disadvantages to going hard at the post tackle there, but we feel that's part of what makes us tick. The other thing that you'll probably look at is, again, your systems and, system errors, and both individual and a group, and just address them. And the other thing is, there's a short time between, particularly in national rugby, is so what you're reviewing is also part of your preview. And Wayne Smith, the ex-All Black assistant coach who did defence for the All Blacks for a long time, very good. He spent 2 weeks in Scotland a number of years ago. A great guy, awesome bloke, and unbelievable coach. And his big thing with the All Blacks, which we've kind of taken on, it's pretty simple, but a lot of his review was his preview.
Mm-hmm.
So if you say, for instance, maybe around the guard shield A, or your defensive 3 guys near the ruck, you may be poor, you weren't coming up as quickly as you should have in one game, and the next week you're playing South Africa, you kind of have the review clips but also mix it with a preview, so they're kind of getting that learning but also push it into next week as well. And I thought that was a real smart way of kind of review and previewing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. And kind of all-encompassing. It's not just little silos of information, but it's actually going in the right direction.
Yeah. And and the other thing is, again, this is a bit of progression with my coach, and what we're doing is usually we have a lot of meetings, both reviewing and previewing. And now I'm getting to the stage internationally is sometimes we'll do what we call a telestration, is that we'll do a bit of a review and then do a screenshot on QuickTime, and then we'll put it in the players. For Scotland instance, we've got a platform called Game Planner, and then the players can go on and have a look at it, and we'll keep the review pretty quick. And then the next day, because I've got so many meetings of, scrum, line out, attack, defence, I might just say, okay, what did you learn here, and kind of quiz them or talk through it, rather than going through the whole presentation at that time. They can do it in their own time that night. So that's something slightly different and progressed over our time. And we've done different things too. Sometimes the players have presented it to the rest of the group, which helps their knowledge and understanding and explanation, which has been a good process. It usually takes a little bit more time to do that, but sometimes it's worth the effort. So, and we mix it up now. In my time at Glasgow, there was a year, or for 2 seasons, basically the players always did it that way, and then we changed it up, and that's what we do with Scotland now. Sometimes the players will present, sometimes we'll present, sometimes we'll put it on Game Planner. So we try and mix it up and change it up, so it's not always the same for the players.
Cool, yeah. All right. Well, moving on. What if you were talking to a coach who just started up a new role, a new defensive role, and they were, completely new to the team, new to the club, didn't really have anything to go on? What advice would you give them in terms of how they'd start? What would their first session kind of look like? Some kind of things to be aware of, mistakes that you've maybe made in the past or other coaches have made in the past, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think I suppose there's depending on what level they're at or where they're at, I think it's important to have a good understanding of maybe the systems which have been in place beforehand, and what's on the techniques, and maybe what's worked and what hasn't worked. Again, and also trying to get a good gauge maybe with some of the senior players of what they believe worked, what believes need to be changed. Also, I mean, depending on whether you're an assistant coach or the head coach, and you're also the defence coach, you probably need to talk to the head coach and say, right, what is my role here? What are you looking for me to achieve? Because what you don't want to do is you don't want to go in sometimes to a place and try and improve everything. You might want to say, right, I want to be better tackler and I want to have more line speed. And you might have 2 or 3 drills or activities or games which you just hammer, and then get that change and improvement. The other thing I think, I certainly need to do a lot better, and when I wasn't a back because I was a flanker, is just scrum defence. Yep. Just kind of who goes where. If they've got a 2-4 set up, do you go 3 and a full back, and just knowing that, depending on which area of the field. I think over my time, there's been some coaches from just talking to them and listening to other players where they've not been a back or they've maybe come from rugby league, and they've come into maybe a rugby union environment, and the players have said, "Oh, what should we do here? How many?" And they haven't really known, and that it's like you don't have to have the answers for everything, but I think if you have a basic role knowledge or have a system in terms of okay, what's happening here and there, it just gives clarity to the players, and it just makes them have confidence in you. That's what I would say. And I think you've got to be hard-nosed. I think you've got to be I think defence is the hard part of the game. So I think you've got to be strong. You've got to listen to the players and that, but you've got to kind of have a strong aura about you as well, whether you're presenting, whether you're doing the activities. I think it's an area of the game that's a strong part. So I think that as a coach, generally you want a pretty strong defensive coach leading that part of the game.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's important, and they're going to be putting themselves in harm's way. So you've got to also have that kind of tone that it's not fun and games sometimes, and that you got to dig in.
Yeah, that's right. And I think the best defensive coaches, which I've seen work or talk to, or that they get really buy-in from their players, and usually a lot of the defence coaches who have had good success have had pretty good themes around the defence. And again, I'm probably referring again to Wayne Smith, because he's probably been one of the best, if not the best, kind of defence coach for a number of period in the Southern Hemisphere. But talking to him, they had certain kind of themes which had a real big emotional attachment to the defence.
Good stuff that ties in with just general team culture and the like.
Yeah, I think again, talking to him, and I've kind of tried to do the same with the teams I've been involved in. You just find something which the team can have an emotional grab to, and when things are tough and you're under duress, and those things are driving you on. And family's always a big one, isn't it? An emotional drive. You always get up for your family or friends or your mates, not letting your mates down. But depending on whether it's a country or an area, you can kind of have stories attached to defence. I think it's a really good one. So
cool. Oh, great stuff. All right. Want to backtrack a bit to what you mentioned earlier with your time at the Reds. No doubt there was quite a purple patch there for Australian rugby there, which unfortunately has been a bit few and far between over the last little while. But it must be hugely memorable, the Super title in 2011. And what do you think were some of the key ingredients to that Red success in that time?
Yeah, listen, it was a fantastic time for me personally, and also just the group and the state and rugby in general. And then New South Wales kind of backed that up a couple of years later, which was great. And they're a bit tougher times at the moment, but hopefully they can change things around. But listen, I think Ewan McKenzie was and what he did was a massive part on why we did well. And you know what, like some of the stuff that the coaches, Phil Mooney, had done previously before we got to where we got to, really helped us as well, because they'd developed the attack part of things really well, but the defence part wasn't kind of where it needed to be, and that was one of the big things, among other things. But I'll probably touch on the defence. So when Ewan came in, I was in the academy, and I'd done defence with the 20s, and I'd written a few reports on the Reds defence and what he had to do, and he read those. And at the time, Queensland Rugby Union were in financial difficulties, so they didn't have a lot of money, and I was in the system, and they said, right, we're going to give you an opportunity, which was fantastic from him. And basically he talked to the players, and he said, listen, we're actually doing in the attacking part of the game in terms of offloads and even tries scored, they were doing reasonably well, but they'd finished 13th in the comp the year before. They were second last. And he said, defensively, we need to make massive shifts. And the first thing he did is he said, listen, defence is important, and we're going to attach a coach to it. And me being a defence coach, I truly believe that in most teams, if you want defence to be really important, you should attach a coach to it. And some teams do. A lot of teams do that now, or do it. And then some teams kind of, a guy might do defence and this other. I don't think that works as well, but that's probably because I'm a bit biased in terms of defence. So he said, right, we're going to spend a lot of time doing defence, and defence is often linked to culture, and that's the other thing. So I think what he did is rightly or wrongly, there was a perception that both on-field and off-field that the culture wasn't where it needed to be at the Reds. Mm-hmm. Ewan always used the same perception as reality. So when you walk into a place, what do you see? And that's basically what's happening. So he really kind of worked hard at that space, the cultural space. And what a simple thing that he did, and a lot of teams do it now and use trademarks, but basically he got the group together and he said, listen, how would you guys like to be perceived by others? You know, basically, to cut a long story short, we sat down and the players came up with 3 words. And then basically from that, they had ownership in terms of what they wanted, in terms of how they wanted to be perceived. And instead of talking about wins and this and that, whatever, they had 3 values, and we just assessed everything on those 3 values, whether it was training, whether it was off-field, whether it was on-field, and that just really drove us. And in the end, it was good that we had those trademarks of behaviours, because you could they came up with the words, and then if they didn't deliver on them, they were held accountable. And I think that was a big part of why we did well. Now, the other area, we talked about defence, and it's pretty hard in professional sport to go from 13th to get in the finals. And we just missed out in the first year. We went 13th to 5th, but the other area which Ewan had a big push on was the style of play. So in that first year, we basically ran everything, really. We had kicking involved, and we used kicking smartly, but we took risks. So and his idea was we want to excite the crowd, we want to bring the crowds back to Queensland, and that worked to a certain extent in the first year. But again, we just dipped out in the finals, and then the next year, fortunately enough, we went from 5th to winning it. So within a space of 2 years, we went from 13th to win it, which was fantastic. And there was a lot of good work. And I think the thing that, and I've just written this down here when I was thinking of a few of the questions, I think with a lot of good teams or teams that are successful, it's a sum of a lot of good professional habits over time. So there was those things which I've just mentioned or talked about was really important, but it was a sum of everything, a lot of different things coming together. And then, again, you need a little bit of luck. And I think what I've said before, and I'm going to give rap to the guys before us, a lot of the guys, like, for instance, the guy Will Genya and Quade Cooper, they got blooded in a Reds team when they were very young and they didn't get many wins. But we got the advantage of their experience 4 or 5 years down the track with all these other things coming to place. Whereas if we probably had, first or second year 9 and 10, we probably wouldn't have won that comp. But those guys went through the hard times, the losses, and we got the experiences with everything else we did. So you need a bit of luck, and that went on. So that was a big part of the cultural change, the defence, and then probably the style of play that really helped us.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, I got just as a fan, watching the Reds play, I think it was the closest an Aussie team has played like a Kiwi team for my memory, even like probably back until the 80s when we had the Grand Slam in the 84, I think it was. The Reds played like proper New Zealand Super Rugby like you see now, and it was awesome. It was an epic time.
Well, I think the guy I haven't mentioned there is Jim Mackay, who's a very, very good coach. He was the backs and attacks coach at the Reds, and then he went on with Ewan to help the Wallabies for that period that they were there, and he's now in Japan, and he's a great coach. He had a very simple philosophy in terms of attack. Like, generally, if we hit up and we got gain line, we got momentum, we went wide after the next phase. If we kind of got parity on, we just hit up with forwards, and we got really slow ball, we came back blind, and he kept everything really simple. And again, we had pretty good players. We also kicked smartly as well. Like the year we won it, it was really funny. We kicked more than anyone in the comp, but no one ever thought that. Everyone thought we ran it, but it was the type of cross field grubbers, and it's a bit like the Kiwis play and how. Yeah. So you're looking to regain it rather than giving the opposition the ball. But listen, a lot of things came together in that period, and for me and for the rest of the state was a great period.
Yeah, and how do you you can't compare, I suppose, to Glasgow's success in the Pro 12. They're different time and different experiences, and you wouldn't want to compare like for like there. But what did you grab from that experience, the win in 2015, and Were there anything that popped out that were like, well, that happened in the Reds too?
So I'll say so Glasgow, in terms of where they were culturally, were, when I say a lot further on. They had a good culture when we got there in terms of they had a real strong work ethic. They really had a strong bond in the place. So that was a really good team to go into. They'd made a semi-final the year before. I think a couple of things. So a couple of things which really helped drive us on there, or as a group. So they had a good culture. A really strong work ethic, and then Gregor and the rest of us kind of implemented a few other things, rituals and things like that. I think the big difference there, and the shift from the semi-final to eventually making a final, losing it, and then winning it, was the playing style. So before Glasgow, Sean Lenine, who'd been the coach for many years there, I think maybe 3 or 4 years before we got there, they'd come second last, and they said, right, what do we need to do? And he basically said, we need to be a hard team to beat. Now, the hard team to beat was from their point of view, when they looked at various teams and different things, was not to make many mistakes and not to play much at all. So a lot of it was kick chase, not play much. And listen, it got them to a semi-final, and they did a great job. But I think the big difference for us was that, particularly the way Gregor wanted to play. Gregor was very multifaceted type of game, offloading, running, passing, kicking. So that was a big shift in terms of the way the game was played, or how Gregor basically saw the team. The great thing for me too is two things which I'll describe. There's many things which, we felt had a good bearing, but two things I thought Gregor did a really good job at was we had a winning template. So there was kind of 6 things that we kind of looked at each week and said, this will win rugby for us. And I'll quickly go through them. The first thing, which was great for me, was we had to have outstanding defence. So that was the number one priority. So any good team, whether it's World Cups, Super Rugby, Pro 14, generally you've got to be right up there defensively to win. So he said that. We don't beat ourselves. So, exiting, turnovers, things like that. We looked at turnover differential and things like that. Win quality ball, so set piece ball was the third one. Create quick ball was the fourth one. Get behind the defence, so offloads, tackle breaks was the fifth one, and then seize the opportunity. So that was basically in the finish zone what we did, and they were kind of ranked in those orders. So that was one big thing. So the players knew what we needed to do to win a rugby game. The other thing, which I thought he did very well, was he really sold the vision. So he sold the vision that we wanted to be the first Scottish team in history to win the Pro 14. And from word go, he had a picture of Leinster basically winning the Pro 14. And he said, right, this is going to be us. And that vision would come up pretty much once a week, just about. Say, this is what we're aiming for, this is what we're aiming for now. So the first year we were there, we made the semi-final. The second year we made the final and lost the final. And the third year we made the final and won it. So that was kind of like a vision we worked at and sold for those 3 years. And like anything, we learned a lot of lessons, valuable lessons on the way. And then winning that final in Ulster against Munster was, again, very similar to the Reds. It was the first time it ever been done. And just the emotion and the amount of supporters we had, it was something that was very special. So
that's cool. It sounds I get like similar time too with Pat Lam with Connacht, like a very similar kind of way he went about it. Was a lot of people told him he was crazy for thinking Connacht could ever win the Pro 12, but every day he'd tell people we're going to do it, and if you say it enough, it'll happen.
Yeah, I think the guy I worked with a guy, Dan McFarlane, who came over to Glasgow from Connacht and had a season with Pat, and then he's Scotland as well, so he knows Pat very well. And what you've just said is, I think one of the strengths from what I was told of Pat is what you just said. He sells a vision, and he really, and the players get behind that, and he really drives a very good like storyteller. He creates that atmosphere and that. So, and they did really well. They built a lot of momentum, and unfortunately, we played them twice.
Oh, that's true, in the semis,
Yeah, and we lost both times, which was a bit of a shame. But to be fair, they were deserved winners and did a great job. And also the style. I thought they played a really exciting style. So. So yeah.
Cool. Okay. Well, just to wrap things up, and
Yeah.
2018 Six Nations is done. What have been some of your observations now that you're doing that review of the season, both in terms of Scotland's defence and other team defences? You mentioned France there a little bit as well. What have been some of your key kind of takeaways from the tournament?
I think listen, we in terms of game by games, we had some really poor games defensively, and then we had our really good one against England, and
Absolutely.
then we had some ones. For us, it's been consistent. Now, part of that's some of our mindset away from home and doing things to get us in the right mindset and things like that. So that's a mental type of area which we're working hard on, and we've had a lot of discussions in around that area just recently. France did a fantastic job in terms of their defence. Unfortunately, they they only conceded, I think it was, I've got written down here, 8 tries, but they only scored 9. So if they could have scored a few more tries and kept the defence like it was, they would have been right up there, right in the mix for winning it. But I think, and they'll know that, and they'll work hard on that. I think, you look at a team like Ireland who are very good both sides of the ball. They're very ruthless and in terms of with the ball, without the ball, and that they did a fantastic job. And they're a very hard team to break down. A couple of things which we were really happy on. We had 3 of the 4 top tacklers in the Nations. We had Johnny Gray making 100 tackles, which was a record, and he's a bit of a
he's totally, a freak. Eh? he misses 2 a year or something.
Oh yeah, we used to have a thing called a continuous tackle chart, which is basically, every time you got a tackle, you go on like a streak. So you make 30 in a row, but if you miss one, you go back to 0, and then 30 would be your streak. One year he was on like 180.
No one could play.
And everyone else was on highest was 30 or 40, and so he's a bit of a freak. He's he's very good. Post tackle, he's very good. But so listen, that was a good for us in terms of that. Watson was very good, and Barclay.
Yeah,
I mean, John Barclay won 7 turnovers, which was the highest as for an individual. So that was really good. So there was lots of good things there. But again, we've got to improve, and I think in times of duress, we've got to make sure that we stick to systems and we're tough on each other. But again, moving forward, I think we're in a pretty reasonable spot, and I think with Edinburgh and Glasgow doing reasonably similar systems, it's going to help the national team moving forward as well.
All right. Well, we always end the show with the same final 4 questions. When you were a kid growing up, who was one of the rugby players that you really admired and who kind of got you right into the game?
Yeah, I suppose it's probably for a lot of young Australians. I think David Campese was,
absolutely.
Even though he was a back and I was a forward, he was always very, very exciting. I think a guy who was very good, number 7, David Wilson.
Yeah, absolutely.
was really good as a player. So probably those 2 Australians for me.
Yeah. No, Campo's right up there. He's definitely one who popped out for me in my childhood as well. And what about now? Who are some of the players going around on the international circuit that you like what they're doing?
Yeah, I think I think from a defensive point of view, the guys that who are in Scotland, the guy John Barclay and Hamish Watson are very good defensive players, and I'm lucky enough to work with them week in, week out. Stuart Hogg's a very exciting player.
For sure.
I mean, the 2 years prior to this, he won Six Nation Player of the Year, and he's very good. Stuart McInally's a number 2 who's really come on as a number 2, who's been really, really good player for me. So they're probably, I'm probably biased. I'll stick to the Scottish players.
Yeah,
so,
for sure. No worries.
Those type of guys were fantastic. I mean, at the time at the Reds, Scott Higginbotham at that time, you would have said was one of the best forwards in world rugby in terms of his ability to kind of attack and score tries and things like that. And Digby Ione and players like that were very exciting. Will and Quay at the time, and so those type of people at the time at Reds were very exciting to be part of.
Yeah, for sure. And what you mentioned a bunch of coaches in the interview. Who are some of the high profile coaches that you like what they're doing?
Oh well, again, the guy I worked with, Gregor Townsend, is very good. I've really enjoyed him a lot. I learnt a lot of Vern Cotter.
Yeah.
In terms of attitude and mindset, it's been good. Andy Robinson, I only worked with Andy for a short period, but he was very good. We just caught up with him recently. He came up and had a chat to us, and he was a very driven type of coach. Without knowing the guy, but you hear good things about Joe Smith and teams and how well they do, and how the players say good things about him. So for probably looking at him from afar, very good. Yeah. So they're probably guys that come to mind. Dave, it's good watching. Like I said, Dave Rennie at Glasgow's doing a great job, and Richard Cockrell at Edinburgh, and you're seeing different activities, different drills, the cultures they're creating both, and what particularly Richard's done in a short period of time. Edinburgh's done a fantastic job in terms of really building a strong culture and a playing style, and they've really, really developed in the short period of time, and I think it's going to really help us as a national team. So he's done a fantastic job there. It's also the guy Wayne Pivac, who's at the Scarlets over here. Scarlets brand of rugby, the way they play is very exciting.
Yeah, they're doing amazing things. I've really enjoyed their turnaround in their style of play for sure. And last question: what about someone lesser known who's not in the professional landscape that's doing good work?
Yeah, I think you look at there's a guy who's doing the Scotland Sevens at the moment, a guy called John Diel,
cool.
who had the Scotland 20s for a period of time there where they beat England, who's really good. I think he's a really, he's the same age as me, but he's doing good things, and I'm sure that there'll be bigger and better jobs coming for him down the track. Ian Monaghan, who's also involved at a underage group, under 18s here, Scotland, the Scotland under 18.
Oh, they just had a couple of good wins, eh?
Did a great job. They beat Ireland, which for a Scottish team under 18s to do that is a fantastic job. So I think he's done a fantastic job, and he's one to really look out for moving up in the Scottish scene. There's a guy in Australia, a guy called Carl Marshall, who works. He's been at Brothers Club for many years. They won the premiership a couple of years ago. He's currently doing the Australian 20s. I think if he got an opportunity at the next level, I think he would do very well. It's one of those things. Sometimes you need a little bit of luck, and us both, me being a former teacher, and you never know, I could go back to teaching at one stage, but sometimes you got to take a leap of faith, or someone's got to give you an opportunity, and that happened to me. I left a really good teaching job at TSS to go into the academy, and I took a bit of a pay cut, but I took a bit of a risk, but I kind of got where I wanted to go by taking a risk. And sometimes you got to chance your arm and do those things. So hopefully some of those guys I've mentioned will get opportunities in the next couple of years.
Yeah, that's great, and good advice too. All right, well, it's been great chatting to you. I could. You're actually the first defence coach on the pod, so I could extend this for another hour, but I know you've got things to do. So it's been a pleasure talking to you, Matt, and I really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing a bunch of great ideas for coaches. And we'll wish you all the best with the upcoming end of season tour coming over this way, as we discussed. You're heading to Canada, US, and Argentina. So enjoy that, and thanks again for coming on the show.
No, thanks, and I really enjoyed. I always enjoy talking rugby. So thanks for having us.
Perfect.
Thanks for listening to the Rugby Coaches Corner podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please leave a review via iTunes and keep listening for the next episode. You can also follow us via Twitter at Rugby Coaches CNR or via the website therugbycoachescorner.com. Until next time, keep sharing ideas to make the game better.